Okay, second on our agenda item is discussion concerning New Hartford's waste and clean water future. Thank you.
In a moment, I'd like to pass out a little discussion guide that we created for the talk tonight. But as I look around, I see that many faces here were not at a meeting that we attended in December. And I'll give a 2-minute overview of that, if you don't mind. Recognizing that the Board of Selectmen had 2 new members, in Jack and Alicia, we came forward to report the activities that we had been involved in, involving wastewater projects on Main Brook, topical update of the project completed for the wastewater plant upgrade, and an additional project that's in its infancy having to do with traffic and parking. And at the time that we said we'd like to come back, we said in January, but it turns out it's February, and share some observations and make a recommendation on a go-forward basis of some things that we thought were in the best interest of the town to have an open discussion. So with that in mind, let me pass these out. Send some down that way. They're coming that way. There should be an extra one in there. Oh. Everybody get a copy?
Yes.
There are two areas that we're going to comment on. One is our observations on wastewater, which is clearly the area that we're closest to. And if you look at the facility managing wastewater treatment, you have obviously the treatment plant and the collection system. We make the comment here that the plant is state-of-the-art and ready but underutilized. And all we want to make is a declaration here that we have a 400,000 capacity plant that operates today about 1/5 of its capacity, unless the Farmington River is at a flood stage, in which case it operates at more than its capacity. The fact of the matter is that in the normal day-to-day operations of saying roughly an average of 80,000 gallons, the plant today could actually use more biologics in helping the feeding process. Not to say it isn't well operated and performing well. As a matter of fact, the DEP singled out New Hartford for the performance of its plant operations and said that I believe it was either the best operating plant in the state or the second best operating plant in the state, which I think is an accolade to the way it's being managed. The collection system for wastewater is 43 years and counting, and we have a series of different types of piping, from clay to cement to plastic. Depending on where you are or what you are going through in the system, you will find various condition reports. But as was recognized on Main Street this past summer, the system is subject to failures. And we had one on the Main Street section here with 170 feet in longest. On the sewer mains, just to give you a topical report, the Farmington line, that which goes behind Town Hall, runs up here to the last house on the outskirts of town, down to the pumping station. The right-of-way is significantly obscured with grown trees and obviously roots. Not all of the manholes have been able to be located on that line in an effort by water planning. And it is that we have not undertaken a video cameraing of that area. But we do know that down here, just the other side of the bridge, there are two extraordinarily poor manholes, one in which the side is caved in and the bricks are gone. And that with the advent of the river coming up to a certain stage, tens of thousands of gallons pour into that open manhole through its side skirt. On the Jones Mountain line, it appears that over the years, trees that have grown to the size of about 12 inches in diameter. And in addition, there is some cross flooding coming down from Jones Mountain, which is cut through on a lateral basis with the line and has taken away some of the fill, where in some cases the line may only be covered to a depth of about 18 inches. In some locations, the manhole covers are missing, and there is also manhole damage. Main Street, as you know, which is a current target of some rehabilitation work, has miscellaneous problems associated with the lines that we've uncovered. Virtually all of the manholes in the downtown district are subject to replacement as we've gone through our discovery. And so we are at a point, just to put some parameter pricing around this, to say that if you look at what we were analyzing for remediation, and on a purely planning figure basis using industry standard figures, we have about $387,000 worth of projected cost, and we currently have about $165,000 available to cover such remediation. So we simply want to put in perspective.
You're speaking of the Main Street.
Yeah, the Main Street one. Simply want to put in perspective that each one of the major lines is subject to some scrutiny because of the condition of manholes, the line itself. And what was portrayed at Jones Mountain as a 12-inch line may in fact not be a 12-inch line. It may be something smaller than that. The pumping station has recently had some reliability problems, and subject to some replacement parts, and recently underwent an estimated $18,000 in repairs. And the only reason for citing that is just to indicate that between all aspects of the collection system, there are some unknown expenditures associated with what's happening on the wastewater side of things. On the clean water side, which is an area where we have less practical hands-on experience, but where we have relied upon talking with Connecticut Water and the current provider of services for water. Street piping is designated by both organizations as what they would call a wild card. It turns out that water has been provided on a commercial basis in New Hartford since somewhere in the 1860s, and had more formalization in the early 1900s, and had formal water companies, private water companies, managing it up until the 70s, when it was in fact that the town bought out the interest and formed the current structure that we have today. So as you talk with people who are familiar with street piping, it is that it's kind of an unknown and a wild card in all of the system per se. The water tanks have had some maintenance issues, but they're generally been of a routine nature. There was an official inspection done on them in 2010. There was a leak that developed this year, which was repaired. The delayed action in terms of a tank cleaning, if I recall correctly, that was going to be undertaken has been delayed for budgetary reasons. That's not a really significant issue. It's just to point out the fact that that's a pending item. Pumping stations have had only minor issues associated with them. There's an observation that the filter tanks in each of the locations are nearing the end of their useful life and will at some point have to be replaced. Both parties to the maintenance of the clean water system indicate that perhaps the biggest threat in the water area may be as a result of septic system failures in Pine Meadow, where the town's aquifer resides. I asked either of the parties who are familiar with the clean water side if they were ranking this on a scale of 1 to 5, how would they rank it? And both parties said they'd call it a 3, so that above the midpoint of the rating. When asked what are their concerns, New Hartford appears to have a number of what are called deadheads. These are pipes that terminate at one location, and so there's not complete water circulation. It relates more to water quality than anything else. But the other thing that they indicate is that we do have some undersized mains that result in not having the appropriate pressures associated for fire protection. This real brief summary was really intended to point out a general conditions report, if you would. We've had no system-wide assessments being undertaken either on the water or the sewer side. And we didn't want to present anything that in our belief was contentious or controversial, just straightforward facts relative to the way things are today. And we are coming forward with a proposal to the Board of Selectmen saying that we'd like you to form an evaluation task force to take on the charter of evaluating and reporting on what we see as three potential options. One would be the maintenance of the status quo, which is to have the WPCA administrate third-party maintenance and oversight of the systems. Two, examine whether or not town ownership and the assumption of operational management makes any sense. Or three, look at the possible lease and or sale of these assets and obviously then get out of the business of being in water and sewer. We make the suggestion that representation would be appropriate from the WPCA. The BOC has offered to serve with the committee. We have reached out to Kate Rieger and Bill Baxter, former first selectman in New Hartford, and would ask you, Dan, to serve as a chairman of such a committee. The idea is that whatever the evaluation determines, we have some future plan to manage for the issues of how we're going to continue to approach this, and then get committed behind that plan and execute against it. So that's the sum and substance of what we had to say about our review.
I appreciate you coming in tonight. I think it's really great that we get people to come in that offer to take time out of their schedule. I know we have numerous volunteers. We have volunteers on many of our boards and commissions that give their time to the town willingly to try to help out. I think that there's really no downside to studying and trying to find a way to improve. I know that we have financial challenges with such a small system of operation and a user group that pays very high rates, you know, to enjoy the simple pleasures of water and, you know, the ability to, you know, access the sewer system. Any information, I think, that would come out of this, you know, in terms of how we might do this better or offer information to our WPCA, or as we work together, some members of the WPCA to provide us if it turns up anything that helps us run the system more efficiently, any speck of information that provides us a way to save some money or to run it more efficiently, I think is a benefit to the taxpayers and the user group of this town. I just can't see not going forward with it. I appreciate, I too have talked with both Kate and Bill Baxter, and also have talked to Chairman Kresh and Steve Hanwright about participating. What type of time frame do you envision for this study?
I have a perspective that says that in a 90 to 120 day period, we ought to be able to gather the information, conduct the analysis, and come back with a report.
Selectmen like to,
Well, it's a good idea, and I'm just concerned about the time frame because right now we're gearing up for a budget season. Do you propose to start it now, or you wanna wait till after the budget?
well, I don't think that if we were to appoint them, we would hold them to a specific timeline. It does get a little busy around here in March and April. But I think it's 90 to 120 days is aggressive, but I'm more than willing to do it. I'm sure my wife will say another night out, but I think it's a worthy cause. I know that we've got this principal deferral on the payment structure, and I know that the clock is ticking on, the financing of how we structure the new treatment, the WWTP, and the impact of what that'll do to the ratepayers again. As the need again comes before us to say, hey, we need to generate more money to pay our debt service, and yet, there's just nothing going on in the construction end of things going on right now, so we're going back to the same user group. Unfortunately, we all wish that we would have more users to
Dan, there is one thing, and
share that.
I wrote a note here and I forgot to mention it. I know everyone was disappointed when we did not get a steep grant approval on the potential for the Cottage Street line. But I do know too that the WPCA, to their credit, has come forward on the clean water side of things and gotten the town listed for the priority listing. Obviously, that's subject to the hearing process and the approval process for it, but hopefully that would be a good news scenario there. And I don't think it holds any implication for what this group might do in terms of making its analysis, but it is that, it still leaves us with our hand in the...
Well, even then though, at the priority list, and the clean water funding is what, 25% grant?
I think it could go as high as 40.
So, you gotta pay to play, and again, it increases the steep grant would have been great, because it would have given us a real high proportion of funding on that, but it's not to be. Selectmen, anybody like to entertain a motion to appoint Mr. Litchfield, Mr. Butler, Mr. Kresh, Mr. Handwright, Mrs. Rieger, and Mr. Baxter to serve along with me on a study group that would report back to the selectmen with some a report of an evaluation and possible recommendations on how we might make some improvements.
So moved.
The only discussion I would say is I'd take it easy on the time frame. That 120 days is pretty quick. You'd hate to we'd like to see that it's due consideration. I know that you guys are dedicated, and once you put you sink your teeth into something, you like to go at it, but budget time, the coincidence of budget time can make for short weeks around here. Days fly by, the weeks turn into months.
Dan, I understand your concerns with budget and all. Since obviously I told you I was not serving on this.
Just for
So
clarification,
I can-
Mike is part of our BOC making our presentation, even though he's not.
Certainly indicate to these fellows that they're going to work hard and get it done, because frankly, if most of this is not done by them. You're into vacation time, and then you're looking into the fall. And as it stands right now, what we're seeing on these lines and whatnot, we need to make some headway and make some decisions. And funding is the key. Certainly WPCA does not have the money they need to work with at this time to do any long-range planning as far as repairs and whatnot. And that is a difficult situation for them and for the town. In that we see possible real problems, catastrophic breaks in these old lines that will be asked to carry more in the future. And we don't even know if they have that capacity. So I think you need to move on this quickly.
This motion on the floor has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion from the selectmen? All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? So that is unanimous. Thank you very much. I think that what I'll do is I'll send out an email to the participants and try to get a time frame to see that if there's a convenient time, perhaps for weekly meetings that we could set up so that there's something, if we have the ability, I can get everybody's, I have everybody's email, but we'll send them out and see if there's a system that we can establish to proceed and how we'll go forward. I'll report back to the selectmen as how we set that up. So, thank you very much.